From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Thursday, November 20, 2025. What if we could lift 1 million Australians out of poverty and guarantee their kids a great education while helping ensure they save, work and secure their own future? A new idea for a nationwide overhaul of welfare and responsibility that could actually work because the organisation behind the idea has done it before. Today, the Cape York Partnership's big dream of giving the bottom million a fair go. The very northernmost tip of Australia, on the right-hand side of the map, stretching from the Gulf of Carpentaria up into the warm waters of the Coral Sea, is Cape York. It's your typical tropical paradise. White sand beaches, drenching monsoonal rains, lots of crocs. And it's also home to one of Australia's most interesting organisations, the Cape York Partnership. It's a non-profit founded by Aboriginal lawyer and activist Noel Pearson and run by Chief Executive Fiona Jose. They do a lot of things, but one of them is running Jarragon College, a prep to Year 12 high school that educates kids from Cape York and the Torres Strait. What you're hearing is the Jarragon kids singing their school song, all about hope, opportunity and responsibility.
It's up to me to do my best, inspired by the spiritual nest. Jarragon, rising up through the clouds. Jarragon, called to share, strong and proud.
Part of the school is the Cape York Girl Academy, a separate campus where young mums can board with their babies and learn how to be great parents while completing Year 12 and getting ready for further education or work. The partnership also runs a Cape York Leaders Program, which has given more than 600 young people secondary and tertiary scholarships to top-tier boarding schools and universities around Australia. It all boils down to a philosophy about education, that to lift themselves out of the poverty endemic in remote Australia, young people need a first-class education they simply cannot get at home.
Rising up through the clouds. Jarragon, called to share, strong and proud.
Has Jarragon Mov, Mipla Deadly, eh?
Every year, kids from Cape York and the Torres Strait travel more than 1,000 kilometres south to Cairns so they can go to Jarragon College and the Girl Academy. They get an incredible education full of support and discipline. Kids lucky enough to get into the Cape York Leaders Program go to the country's best boarding schools. But what about the rest?
The quality of the high schools in remote communities is frankly not there.
Paige Taylor is The Australian's Indigenous Affairs editor.
I don't think anyone would try to argue that you can get a top-notch high school education at a very remote school. It's just not possible. Every year on Cape York, there are 340 kids ready to go to high school. A really small number can go to boarding school, less than a quarter of that. So Cape York Partnership is saying the opportunity to go to a really good boarding school should be open to all of those children.
The Cape York Partnership's been around for 30 years and they've enacted a series of really ambitious reforms in collaboration with government.
I think probably the most headline-grabbing reform is the Family Responsibilities Commission, which acts like a tribunal. These are local people who make decisions. Perhaps they get a tip-off from the Education Department, a referral they call it. Mr Jones's kid has not been coming to school, something like that, and they have a pretty thorough conversation about Mr Jones' situation. They listen to Mr Jones and they will make a decision. Does this person get a warning? Does this person need some support? Does this person actually need some welfare control so that their welfare can only be used for food and other essentials until they learn to manage a bit better. And that's been a system that has worked a lot better, from what I understand, than the cashless debit card, which was blanket reform. It didn't matter if you were managing yourself well or not. You're on it if you're in that region. And the other thing about the welfare reform in Cape York is that you can come off that welfare control if the Family Responsibilities Commission decides that you've been travelling really well, and that'll be lifted.
On Tuesday in Sydney, Fiona Jose, the boss of Cape York Partnership, made a speech calling on politicians to support a bill in both the Commonwealth and Queensland parliaments. The bill would use these big ideas nationally to give the most impoverished families across Australia, regardless of race, a big incentive and help to get out of the welfare trap. It's based on a piece of legislation introduced in the US towards the end of World War II, the GI Bill, which offered returning veterans subsidised education and mortgages to get into housing, low-interest loans to start businesses, and opportunities to get vocational training and a job. The partnership's idea is for the Personal Responsibility and Opportunity Act to make that idea Paige just explained national. Each family and child gets a plan to stay in school, manage their money effectively, and save for home ownership.
Cape York Partnership is talking about responsibility and opportunity. It sounds like an abstract kind of thing to say, but their point is when a parent commits to the responsibility of sending their child to school, the government then has an obligation to make sure that the child is taught and that the quality of their education is really a good one. What Cape York Partnership is saying is this idea has very wide application. Parents have a duty and a responsibility to raise their children well, to look after their health from a very early age, to take care of their children from conception so that they are developmentally on track. And when they meet those obligations, the state then has an obligation to teach them well, to give them a quality education, and to help them graduate from Year 12 with an actual outcome, like a leaving certificate or equivalent, not just you attended until Year 12.
Coming up, why common sense ideas about education are actually pretty radical. Education is core to Noel Pearson's philosophy about lifting people out of poverty. What does he say is the kind of education that people who are at risk of ending up on welfare need?
Noel Pearson's very clear, and so is everyone at the Cape York Partnership, that Year 12 graduation is the powerhouse. And that doesn't mean you stayed at school enrolled until Year 12 was finished. I think there is a big difference. It means graduating with what they call an education outcome. You get a certificate that is recognised and useful. And what they've done through the Cape York Leaders Program is track the kids who've been through Year 12 and got a graduation. And it really does change the life trajectory.
Now, Noel Pearson, as an individual, has kind of been fighting the trends that go through education for years.
There is still a resolute resistance and obscurantism in relation to the teaching of letter-sound relationships in English.
He famously delivered the Boyer lectures a few years ago explaining why direct instruction, which is where a teacher tells the class something that the teacher knows and the class doesn't know, or teaches something like reading with a simple system like phonics, why those traditional forms of education need to come back, as opposed to the kind of child-led learning that became very fashionable in the 80s and 90s.
One of my ancestral languages is Gugu Yimithir. If you were to learn my language, I would need to explicitly teach you a number of phonemes that are sounds of the Gugu Yimithir alphabet unfamiliar to English speakers. One of them is the phoneme N, written NH. It is formed by putting your tongue at the back of your top teeth. The groper fish is called ninini. Another phoneme common to Australian Aboriginal languages is ng, spelt ng. English speakers know this phoneme at the end of words like bring and sing, but would have to explicitly learn it because numerous Guguyimidar words start with ng, such as ngali, you and I, and ngandan, us. They would also need to learn the trilled R, such as in wara, bad, and kangaroo, kangaroo. R is common to Australian languages but unknown to English, so I would need to explicitly teach you these phonemes.
Noel Pearson's ideas, if you don't know much about the topic, seem extremely common sense and kind of ordinary, but actually they're quite radical, aren't they?
I think it is radical to some people, and there is a whole generation of teachers who went through university being taught about child-led learning, where you follow the child's interests and intuition. And so having a situation where the teacher calls out a word and the children spell it back to them again and again, that's quite a big difference in techniques. I've been in classrooms where people have been teaching using that direct instruction method and versions of it. There's another one called explicit instruction. And it does sound very dogmatic and staccato, but the results are there. And you can see the kids learning the deep structure of language as the lesson goes on. No one's left behind. They don't move on until everyone's got it.
Paige Taylor is the Australian's Indigenous Affairs editor. You can check out all her journalism right now at theaustralian.com.au.